Welcome to Momentum Conversations, where scholar activists, educators, and change makers bridge ideas and put faith into action. Real voices, real vision for information, inspiration, and intergenerational liberation. I am Dr. Martina V. Let's experience momentum. Hello and welcome to Momentum Conversations. We are excited once again to be here with some amazing women who are part of the Momentum Conversations community, where we are talking about our work as doctors, our journey as we have come through 3 years of being part of a community of scholars, activists, practitioners, and we are in this space right now because we are so dedicated to the work that we have done and what we have committed ourselves to, that we wanted to still remain in community with one another. Now, in the spirit of Momentum Conversations, we believe that you are the best one to identify yourself. You know you better than anyone. So I am going to right now offer the microphone to either one of you to introduce yourself and share why you're here today and what we're going to be talking about as around this topic, everyone. Ain't I a woman? So I'm going to pass it over to either one of you to introduce yourselves.
All right, I'll go, Vanessa. I see you. So hello, Dr. Martina. I'm so happy to be on here and that you invited us and were thinking about us when you were planning this podcast. So I am Dr. Keyana Terry, a lovely member of Cohort 7, and I'm just super grateful to be here to be able to continue these conversations that we had the last 3 years together. Yeah, I'm currently a 7th grade language arts teacher. I have been teaching for my 12th year. I'm in Florida. So yes, I know we have a lot to unpack in that that sense, but I'm very passionate about education and I love talking about how we can make schools better, especially in this climate, and especially talking about Black women and how we show up in this space, because historically, you know, Black women have been critical to education, but sometimes I feel like our roles have been kind of dissipated because of the system. And how do we kind of rework that and revive that spirit of Black women in leadership, in education, and being vocal about what we know kids need, especially Black students. So thank you for having me.
Hi, good afternoon and good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Vanessa Willis. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a school-based mental health clinician. And I have the opportunity of serving throughout 8 secondary schools, supporting the infrastructure of the mental health services and social emotional supports that students are receiving. I am thankful to be here with my fellow sisters, Dr. Martina and Dr. Keyana. It has been an honor studying and learning and navigating the process and trenches of a doctoral program for the past 3 years. And boy, what a journey it has been. I'm excited to engage in conversation. I'm passionate about well-being, wellness. I believe that it is so important to be taken care of from the inside out, because we lead and we bleed and we function from the inner space, which is our mental capacity. That's where our will and our emotions and our thought patterns stem from. And so we know that that is the area that is the building blocks to the decisions that we make. Very passionate about youth development as well. And so I'm just excited to have this conversation in such a pivotal time.
Absolutely. I think it is fair for us to share with those who are watching that we really do enjoy talking to one another. This is not just a podcast in the traditional sense. We really do enjoy talking to one another as sisters, as scholars, as women, as researchers. We genuinely enjoy getting to know each other's passions and purpose, and we love being supportive of that with one another. And so one of the things that I really want to highlight about this particular episode around Ain't I a Woman is our journey as women through the process of this doctoral program. Now, as we talk about that, it's not limited to that. It is the full scope of who we are in how we approach what we do as women. So I want to just, start with that. Let's start with, how did you feel about being a woman, a Black woman, entering into the doctoral program as a whole? How did you feel about that? Because some people talk about imposter syndrome. Some people talk about, not being very comfortable with the decision. Some people are very comfortable. Like, I knew I was going to do this from the beginning. Can you talk about your experience as you approach going into the doctoral program? And then your journey.
I'll go this time, Dr. Terry. I think for me, this question is always interesting when I'm asked, because I have an unconventional journey. I literally, tell of my story. I literally was on the trajectory to be a lawyer in my undergraduate years. That was my bread and butter. I wanted to do entertainment law because I love music and bring both of the worlds together. But I literally experienced a trajectory shift when I graduated and was rejected from 7 law schools. And if you know anything about me, I'm very academic, so that was a big deal. That broke my little heart, but it was probably the best gift of rejection that gave redirection. And so from there, I journeyed into, I was a customer service manager for 4.5 years. And in that space, a lot of times people would be like, you have so much potential. Why are you here? You should be doing so much more. But what they did not understand is that I was being groomed for a greater purpose, and learning how to serve people, and learning how to manage my emotions under pressure, and learning how to, de-escalate situations and connect with people from all different walks of life. Those were the building blocks in that space. And I consider that my pasture, like David. And then on top of that, I was a teacher for 5 seconds. I always say that literally. And then I ventured into student engagement work, where I worked with truancy and chronic absenteeism. And that's where I found my stride, working with youth. At the same time, going to school to be a marriage and family therapist, the call to healing work. And then all of a sudden, I was sitting in the middle of COVID in my class online, thinking that I'm like a year and some change out from finishing this program. And I got the prompting from the Lord to continue my education. And I was like, say what now? I just want my life back. Leave me alone. But that was not the plan that he had. And I was directed to American University. I went, I applied. And this is the beauty of the collision moment. The reason why I brought up rejected from 7 law schools. The Lord revealed after that, he said, I showed you when I'm not for something. Now I'm about to show you when I am for something. I literally applied to one school and I said, there is no plan B. It's plan fate. And if it is for me, it's going to be for me. And if it's not, it will not be. And the doors opened and I got accepted and I didn't have to fight. There was just a grace to do it. And I find it very interesting that sitting on the intersectionality of education, of mental health, of being creative and a spiritual leader, still trying to figure out how all those come together. But it's not my job to figure that out. It's just my job to keep showing up. That's what being a woman is. We keep showing up, even if we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Keyana, Dr. Keyana.
Yeah, Vanessa, it's so interesting when you meet people that end up in education. It's like, this wasn't the first plan we had for ourselves. I think some people know they want to teach, they want to go into this field, but you meet a lot of people where it's being led to or called to, and you don't realize that. And that's kind of what happened to me. Like, I have a degree in health science. My plan was to go into the medical field, be a doctor, a dentist, I had changed my major in anything that was related to science. And then it wasn't until, you know, I had to do a 5th year of undergrad and I was tutoring, and I was tutoring student athletes in biology. And all of a sudden, like these kids that had failed like biology twice, 3 times, you know, they passed because I was helping them. And I was like, I would go home and like learn and like, okay, I'm going to plan this little lesson. And I didn't even know that I was doing this, but I was like, I really wanted these kids to pass. And so that was kind of like my spark of like, so basically when you don't know what you want to do, I continued school and wound up getting my master's in social science education. Um, and so started teaching, and I just really loved it. I fell in love with the classroom. You know, it was just really surprising. I felt like God really was like, Keyana, this is where I need you to be. And the funny thing is, even when I thought I wanted to be in the medical field, I was like, I always wanted to teach eventually. I was like, yeah, I'll do this, but I'll teach. So I'm just grateful that like God just really jacked me up in my situation and was like, no, this is what we're going to do. And it feels comfortable. It's still difficult, but I felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is my ministry. And whatever I do moving forward, this is kind of where I want to reside. And so also I also knew that I wanted to do some type of doctoral program. I wanted that terminal degree just to be done with school. And yeah, that's when I decided after what, like 10 years, I think, or maybe like 9 years. And, you know, it's time to apply for a doctorate. You know, I might want to go into leadership, just needed to open those doors. And the funny thing about AU is I had been looking at their program for like 2 years before I actually applied. Like I would like send them my information and they would call me and I would never pick up because I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready yet.
I did the same thing, so I
Yeah.
don't feel bad.
You know, and so I just didn't want any regular doctorate program. I wanted it to be focused on social justice, talking about anti-racism, because I know this climate. I'm a Black woman. I was serving majority minority students, and you kind of see these things, and I'm like, these practices aren't going to work. It's not sustainable. And so I was really focused on a program that was explicit about that, and that was AU. And you know, you never know if you make the right decision when you apply. You never know what's going to happen, but I was like, I thank God that this was it, because from our first class, when it was us in a small group, us three and one more person, Black women, and that was my first time in an all Black learning space. In my how many years of schooling, I've never had that experience. And that's when I knew, I was like, this is it. This is where I'm going to be. This is perfect. This is where I'm going to learn. And it really showed me that like, this is why people choose HBCUs. This is why sometimes like the collective cultural experience is so important in a learning space, because it brings down a lot of guards where you can be vulnerable, you can be transparent, and people get it. You know, you don't have to like give a whole nother dissertation to your response. Like you can just say it and people are like, yep, got it. And you know, you can expand like, so it was just a very powerful experience for me. And like Martina said, like, we do this. This is just another day on a phone call because we just enjoy talking to one another. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what? You know, Vanessa, you mentioned healing and wellness and those things. And I just want us to kind of just stay right there for a minute, because we're living in some times where we're seeing a lot of harm, a lot of hurtful things, unsafe spaces that are being created by people who we're not on their mind. We've seen the level of cruelty in this former election, where we had a Black woman who even that was placed in question. We saw the kind of attacks that were made on her person, her being, her humanity in that space. And as we are moving forward in this conversation, I think it's fair to say, or at least share, that that healing part, that wellness part Dr. Keyana was talking about is something that we all really did appreciate about being with each other. We valued that. And so when the question comes up about our Black womanhood, can y'all talk about the value of that part? That when you are going through this this life journey, whatever it is, like you said, Vanessa, like 7 times of hearing no is 7 forms of rejection that you had to shake off to get that one yes. And to have to experience that in your spirit, in your soul, in your mind, like that's not just, oh, okay, they said no, that's 7 times no. And what that does. I would love for the two of you to just talk about like the significance of healing, wellness, and keeping yourself in a space where you prioritize your own safety, your own well-being. Can you both talk about that as well?
Wow. So when you said 7, I guess I never put the two together. I'm in cohort 7, and then it was 7 rejections. That's God right there. Okay. That's serious. God made his point very clear. But to your point, and I've been studying the the book Destroying the Spirit of Rejection by John Eckhart. And rejection is rooted in a lot of the struggles and experiences that we walk through. And a lot of times we talk about rejection, we often see, different responses to it. We either become students of the rejection process, or we become bitter or upset, or we wear it as a source of our identity. And so I believe, as we're talking about wellness, one of the most powerful things through this program and through the 6 years of schooling is God used this to break me down, to build me back up. Taught me what it feels like to experience burnout and the necessity of making vows to myself to take care of myself in the process. I often utilize the terminology when you're on the plane. They always tell everybody, make sure you put on your oxygen mask before you put on the other person's. And a lot of times I'll talk to clients and be like, that's selfish. I'm like, how is it selfish? Because you have no air and you're putting on that mask, you're gonna die. By the time you help that other person, you have nothing else to give. And so when we talk about this work as a woman, we have a responsibility to take care of ourselves, because as the Black woman, we have been historically pushed and expected to carry the weight of the world literally on our shoulders. We are expected to clean up the messes. We are expected to nurse babies that are not ours. We are expected to show up and shed blood and bleed and stand in the gap and advocate, even at our own demise. And so I believe that in this season, we have a true opportunity to model for those that are coming after us, and to also encourage those who are in the game that rest is a form of resistance, and that it's actually necessary to be sustainable. And when I know that we talking about faith, so I'm going there. We look at Jesus, right? Jesus literally gave us the blueprint on how to be the ultimate leader. He not only did his assignment, he worked the will of his Father, but he also made a very important demonstration of taking that time to withdraw, taking that time of solidarity, taking that time to assess the shifts within seasons, to know when to be around people and to know when to take space for oneself. And I know in our pre-conversation, we talked about the womb. And I believe that as we gathered as a community, me coming into the space, carrying that rejection, carrying, the wounds of being rejected from the space that I'm called to, being rejected as the kid that was not deemed as smart enough, as good enough, as we're not sure if you're supposed to be here, we're not sure if you're going to amount to anything, and having to come back to that same space and be called to that space. It does require healing, because you don't want to bleed on the people that you're called to feed.
Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah. I don't know. Were you going to say something, Martina?
I was just going to say, Dr. Keyana, talk about, when we decided to do this, Ain't I a Woman? And we talked about Sojourner Truth.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, Dr. Vanessa, in our pre-conversation, we have a pre-conversation before we had the conversation. And in the pre-conversation, we talked about the significance of Sojourner Truth specifically, and how she had birthed 13 children, right? And we were talking about how our womanhood and our wellness has so much to do with what is produced and what comes afterwards. And right now, we are experiencing such an attack on our life-giving abilities and our qualities and our nature. This is about our nature as God's creation. And so we are experiencing attacks in that very area. So when we talked about Ain't I Woman and honoring Sojourner Truth, it was, how do we do that and give life and birth and something new and something valuable to that next generation by how we model this thing called Black womanhood, which includes, right, rest, which includes taking care of ourselves. And I'm going to say that hasn't always been the case. Modeling those areas was not the case. So I would love for you to talk about just what does that look like? Like you talked to, you have 7th graders right now. You are Dr. Terry now. Like if you came back to this new school year with a different title, a different, perspective, having a different group and community. Can you just touch upon that? Like, what does that look like for you now to model that in front of this next generation? Like they're 7th graders now, but those are the ones that are going to be voting. Those are the ones that are going to be shaping the future in just two presidential terms, in a sense. So I want to know, just how are you modeling that? How do you do that in front of young people?
Yeah. And I think, if you were to ask me this question as a first year teacher, I don't know what my answer would be, but coming into year 12, it first starts with, my faith. Like I have to operate in the spirit. I have to make sure that my heart is prepared every day, because I don't want to show up. I cannot show up the way other people show up, but I also don't want to show up in what I think is right. So it's like, God, how do you need me to show up for these kids today? You know what's ahead of me. You know what these kids need better than I do. So what version do they need? And that's how I really try to stay aligned. And as I've continued to grow, in my faith and even working in this field, I just cling to the Lord so much, because it is easy to be shifted because you're working with people and you're working with adolescents. So it is easy for you can be out of pocket. But the more I can stand firm, and not be so, going back and forth and responding to every single thing. I think that's one way to help model, like they can see, oh, Dr. Terry, she's not shaken up when, this has gone wrong, or, I can respond with peace and in love and with grace. But I think also too, something that I've learned is, maybe students might pick up on this, but I think as Black women is knowing when the space is not for you and not supported for you. And that's something that I grew to learn, because I'm a loyalist. I want to stay loyal to people. I want to do what's right. I don't want anybody to think I'm a quitter, but it gets to a point where it impacts your health. And that's what happened to me, where I learned, and it impacted me first physically and then again mentally. And I realized I cannot stay in a place that is not for me, that I get the Sunday scaries. I am anxious. I am angry. I cannot stay in a space like that. And if it's anything that I hope to model is, I will remain in a place and I will speak highly of a place that I feel safe, that honors me, that encourages me. And thank God I found that place where I am now, which makes it a lot easier because I think before you feel like, and same with Sojourner Truth, right? Like she's saying, ain't I a woman? Trying to let these people know, like, hey, y'all talking about voting, but hello, first of all, I've been saying this, but y'all are ignoring me. And sometimes you feel that way, people constantly being ignored. And but having, like, to your point, Vanessa, like the weight of the world, having these expectations, but y'all really aren't hearing me. But when you're in a safe space, like I just want, Black women especially to know you don't have to work that hard. And it's amazing. You don't have to work that hard. People will trust you because of who you are and not these other accolades. Because before I got the doctorate title, was in a safe community that was able to just, we had trust. We can, honor one another. So I think that's really important. So yeah, just really staying faithful. Like I can't say that I do X, Y, and Z with that, but God is good. And to do this work that we do, it takes a higher power because working with people is very difficult and very challenging. I should say it's powerful, it's great, but it can be very challenging. So yeah.
You know, and when you introduce the idea of faith, it is not something that is religious.
Mm-hmm.
We all are very open about our faith, but we're open about our faith because we saw faith applied. We saw love applied. We saw joy applied. This whole series is called the Radical Joy series because of the way joy showed up at the conclusion of our commencement. It was a joy that was ancestral. It was a joy that was natural, organic. It was powerful. It was so profound and collective that it ended up that radical joy ended up being something that someone somewhere else decided, oh, I'm going to record this and put this on TikTok. So when you're talking about this radical faith, in a sense, that allows you to experience that joy, allows you to experience that space, I would just love for you all to talk a little bit more about how you see faith being part of the academy. How do you see faith being part of the process? Because we found it, but I know people are looking at this and are like, wait a minute. Once again, they went to American University. So how is this the case? I would love to hear you talk more about that.
That is such a profound question. And I go back to when I was sitting in graduate school for marriage and family therapy, and one of my professors said, one of the things that they will not tell you is that one of the components, the key components to healing, is there is a spiritual aspect. There needs to be a being that is greater than you, a greater force than you, to bring you into that space of healing and to continue to sustain that change. And so when I look at that and I apply it to being at American University and navigating, we're not just navigating people, we're navigating people, processes, procedures, and systems that existed before us, that were not built for us, that did not consider or include us, as Dr. Martina mentioned. And so when you have all of these different dynamics, and then the war that is inside of us in our mental model, right, that shows up as imposter syndrome, or questioning, why am I here? Am I supposed to be here? Because sometimes when we are in the spaces that are of divine purpose, warfare shows up. And so I remember even when we were in our program, we experienced so many overturning of policies in Supreme Court. I'm sitting there and I'm like, Lord, you sure I heard you right? Right. And that's the thing. We as believers, we come to understand that the kingdom of light operates the opposite of standard status. And so what one will see as obstacle, we have been given the knowledge to see as an opportunity. And so faith gives us the ability to see the impossible, gives us the ability to keep going when people say it's not going to work, right? I've watched all of our cohort members create unique and divinely inspired problems of practice. You know, people didn't just say, I'm just going to write something that I know. People dig deep and literally lived it out and shed tears and sacrificed time, and also became pregnant with a vision and allowed that vision to matriculate and to nurture and to build and to grow, and then at the right time, through contraction and through supportive community, the ability to give birth to that vision. And so spiritual sight is important because it allows us to write the vision. It allows us to make it plain. It allows us to sense and discern the times and the seasons that we're in, so that we are able to position ourselves to be of help and not of hindrance. But when we move from natural senses and emotion, when we move from trauma responses, we miss monumental moments. We miss the momentum, all puns intended. So it's so important that, I mean, it's the crux of everything. I believe that even the vision of this momentum is spirit led. So I think it's very revolutionary that we showed up unapologetically, not just as scholars, but as spiritual leaders in our own right, living and breathing and living this thing and showing that these two worlds can collide and create monumental impact.
Dr. Keyana, you want to say anything about that? Because yeah.
No, I mean, Vanessa stayed taking us home, but I just want to add to yes, and I think thinking about, to your point, Vanessa, about seeing the two worlds collide, it's so much like, we've done so much schooling, and there's not a lot of faith-based conversations happening in the classroom, at least for me. And I think when we talk about academia, especially when you get to the doctoral level, it becomes very isolationist. It becomes very individualistic. And that is what I think that notion can kind of spread the higher you matriculate. But I think being in the space that we were really brought it back to, no, we always need community, because if it wasn't for the encouragement, the prayers, people standing in the gap for one another, I mean, I don't know if I would have finished when I finished. I don't know, if things would have come together, because you have those moments of doubt. You have these moments, but I didn't have to rely on, just my committee to get that encouragement, or myself. Like, there was a community of people where you can just me and Vanessa yap so many times on the phone. We'd be like, okay, I'm about to go. An hour later, okay, I'm about to go. But you have that space, and you have people who, again, are going to stand in the gap for you. So I really think it's also that community that is so necessary, that sometimes gets pushed to the side, as you matriculate through, this system, that it's not necessary. There should be community.
And I would dare say we talked about this before as community as a womb. And we made the metaphor of community as a womb, that community is really what incubated us through the process. And it was, what's the word I want to say? It was actually revelatory for me to be able to see community in that way. Is that it's a place where you set this seed, this being that you don't know what it's going to be yet, but you give it space and you hold it close until it finally evolves to come out to say, hey, here I am. And I know my journey with my process was one where I had dealt with rejection so much so that I decided I am going to just shrink. I am going to just play it small, which we I don't know where I thought I could do that, but it was what I was trying to do. I was trying to play it small, and then I would enter into these spaces and to be seen. And so it was oftentimes you're seeing me, my cohort seeing me, saying, wait a minute, no, something is growing there, something is developing there, something is happening. And the decision that I want to be a part of it. I want to be included in the journey. I want to walk with you. And that desire to see each other evolve into what God was doing with us has never left us. It's still here. It wasn't part of something that was cultivated by AU in as an institution. It was in our hearts and in our spirits and in our minds and part of who we are. And so I think of the learning that happened exponentially. If community was a womb, we had multiple births, right? We had multiple births in that space in different ways. And I would like to talk about, just real quick, the opposite of that community space, oftentimes created in education. Oftentimes, as teachers, we are not led to stay in that community space, to build community with our colleagues. They might say it. They might say you're having these learning communities, but what we know is that oftentimes is not really done, right? Unless it's intentional. You have to have a leader that really does see community as a womb for professionals as well, not just the students, but for professionals. And so as we look at what we have found as part of this cohort, is also connected to how we return back into our respective spaces professionally. Like Dr. Keyana, you were going back to Florida, where there's a whole lot of hostilities. I'm in Texas, right? And you have these really hostile and hurtful spaces that we are still expected to go into them and to contribute to them and to impact them and to influence them for the better, right? When everything around us is not, it's actually toxic. It's a toxic environment where we are expected to hold and nurture something which is our next generation of humanity. And so I say all of that because I wanted us to just center that for people who are listening, that this community as a womb is something that is beyond what we're talking about in terms of our cohort and how we approach the doctoral program. It is really, this community is significant in how we model it to our young people, how we live it out, how we talk about it, how we express it, and how we receive it. So I know for me, my first semester, I was going through so much mental distress and hurt and pain. I didn't know how to receive it at first. And I tell the story of how, Dr. Vanessa was like, you didn't make it to, I was having surgery, you didn't make it to residency, which is the one time a year we would come together in person. You didn't make it, but I'm sending you your shirt. I'm sending you the things so that you still feel part of the community. Dr. Keyana, you still were like, okay, hey, this is happening. We're having our advisory. I don't see you. Are you okay? It was so intentional for us to participate in that community. And then eventually I was like, my healing is over here. My support is over here. My needs are going to be met in this space. And so I wanted to, just talk about community as a womb, because when we landed on that, it was definitely something we realized we need to amplify that message, that metaphor to people, to say, don't shy away from it, because that is what COVID the pandemic did. It put so many people in isolation. But now I believe that God is calling us into community more than ever. And the plan of the enemy is to have us divided along issues of race, issues of gender, issues of sexuality, so that we can go right back into this mindset of isolation. But we can't learn the lessons of humanity in that space. We need each other. We need each other to be able to have the relationships that are healthy, that keep us well, that keep us loving, that keep us in joy. And I'm going to pass it. I'm not even going to ask a question. I'm just going to have one of y'all just respond to that whole idea of the community being the.
All right, I see that look. So when we talk about the last time, Dr. Terry actually lifted up in our pre-conversation about, the higher we go in our professionalism is the less community. There's less community in the leadership role. There's less opportunities for mentorship. There's less opportunities for that support. And within a, education setting, a doctoral setting, as Dr. Martina mentioned, you get your degree, you move on. You move on and it's about you. It's focused on I and me and mine. And the reality is that we were given the unique gift within this cohort to return back to what we know. If we look at the African culture, we are collectivistic individuals. We I have my grain and you have this, and we come together and create a meal. We create our communities. We create the resources that are few. It becomes many when we are together. And so we know if we go back historically, it was the design of white supremacy to destroy that collectivistic power, because that womb produced revolutions, it produced transformations, it produced cities and countries and governments and so many great things and artistry. And so the white supremacist mental model was designed to shift and say, if I can separate and isolate you, I can weaken your connectivity. And if I weaken your connection, your ability to cultivate and to create at that high frequency will be lessened because you are not connected. And so we were designed to be pushed out of community. And we talked about the woman with the issue of blood, right? And how she was pushed out of community, and, that she, was ostracized for her condition. And she was literally bleeding, right? And we talk about being a woman and Sojourner Truth having 13 children, right? All of this wrapped together really reveals the community is brought together collectively, and there is an incubator that is sustained through blood, and it's sustained through ideas, and it's sustained through pain, it's sustained through loss and hardship. And as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about different cohort members who endured grief and loss and surgeries and sickness and infirmities, and some who came into this program literally inspired by the loss of a loved one to drive their work, right? All of this community holds the good, the bad, the indifferent, the messiness. That's the purpose of community. It creates a capacity to house all of the things, pain, purpose, destiny, in such a way that it holds people close, creates that safe space that could not be created on an individual level. So community is necessary. It's as necessary as air for all of us. And so I think that's important for us to bring that to this next generation. And we were able to create something so beautiful.
Wow. I mean, you said it so well, Vanessa, like making that comparison to the community as a womb just helps to really see that, like, this is not for show. Like, community is not just a group of people coming together to just do these things. It's really holding space for people's ideas, who they are, their beings, their knowings, their experiences. Like, it was just such a powerful experience. And to your point, when we think about the womb, it's both healing and growth, right? We're birthing things, we're developing and growing something. but also there's healing in that. And it doesn't happen outside. Like we think about like an actual womb, that the baby can't grow outside of that. That's not happening. Now, with advanced technology, maybe, I don't know. But like when we talk about the womb, that's not happening. Everything is tied in there. And so that collectivist idea is somewhat foreign to Western culture. And so when we think about that, it's hard. But when you're actually in it and you get to experience what it means to truly be transparent and vulnerable, and these people can see you, they see you deeply, and they think of you. Like to your point, Martina, people thinking about you, and you don't even realize that. Like none of us, we've only really seen each other 3 times, but it feels like I've known y'all for so long. And so I think like our experience just truly showed me what it means to at least give me an experience of this idea of collectivism and what that means. And I have friends who are from the continent of Africa, and the way the community is for them would be just, I'm like, so that's not your sibling, that's not your family, but like these people are truly family. And so how do we get back to that is really like my goal, especially within the Black community, and it not always being on the backs of Black women to create those spaces, but how can we work together, because we need each other. And how do we create this community as a womb, not this fake where you owe me something. No, you show up just how you are, and we will make do, we will figure it out, because that's when we will really grow. And like historically, when we talk about like the Reconstruction era, like the first thing Black people did with their freedom was learn to read. They looked to education. Look, if I can read something, I'm gonna teach you this. And it was just such a beautiful system that you saw literacy rates skyrocket from it being illegal to know how to read and write. So it's like, how can we get to that level of community where we are truly invested in one another, to where we want to see us grow? We want to see that healing, whatever we can do to get that.
So I love it that you mentioned that whole idea of somewhat of that indigenous nature that we have, that it's just part inherent to who we are. And in the selection of our research, because we've done a lot of talking about our womanhood, our experiences in the program, but now I want to just move on for just briefly into your actual research, things that you were able to apply your womanhood and your positionality as a Black woman to your research. And so I have here Dr. Keyana Terry's abstract, and the title of her research was Mapping Belonging, Uplifting Black Girls' Perceptions and Interpretations of School Spaces. And I know, Dr. Terry, like when we talked about this "Ain't I a Woman" topic, at first it was like, shouldn't we talk about girlhood? And so I want to bring that in, because I feel like, once again, we're talking about modeling for another generation what this looks like. And so can you talk about what your research revealed to you, beyond the findings, right? But what did your research, when you walked away from it, what did it reveal to you about that space of being a Black girl, and then the evolution of Black womanhood?
I think the biggest thing for me, and I will say, working with my co-researchers who were 12, 13-year-old Black girls, was probably 2 things for me: was the importance of psychological safety, and just really being unapologetic. So if anybody's ever worked with the youth, they don't sugarcoat anything. But it was something that I didn't used to do as a child, even when I was their age. I was very conscious of my words. I was essentially a people pleaser, but I also grew up in predominantly white spaces. And so being that authentic version of myself, I don't think I was at that age and for a long time. And so I think doing the work that I did of like hearing their experiences and talking about how they interpret this buzzword of belonging and identifying what that looks like in physical spaces and not just, you know, through theories and, you know, definitions. It was really powerful to see like, as Black women and Black girls, we deserve to exist just in our own skin and not you tolerating, but just understanding that this is who we are. And it's not up to you to pass judgment or say yes or no, but it's also for me, the taken is like, it actually doesn't matter if you have something to say, good or bad. I don't need to be attached to any of those feelings. I can just exist in who I know I am to be, who God has told me I need to be, and that be okay. So I think doing that work, you know, you never think about as a researcher what's going to come from me because you're working with others trying to solve something else. But it really had a huge impact on me, just as a Black woman in the work, you know, that I hope to continue to do.
And I to just say and follow up on that is that there's all that little girl in us that never leaves us as Black women. She is always sitting there with us. And what I loved about your research, Dr. Keyana, was you gave that little Black girl a voice that could speak to her environment when many of us were marginalized and silenced as little girls and did not have that opportunity to even tap into, is this a space that's good for me? We had no control, we had no no decision. It wasn't a decision that we could make. That was a decision that was someone else's, and we were just placed, even if we didn't feel safe, even if there was no sense of belonging, which therefore translates sometimes to a whole lot of broken women because they're operating in their childhood trauma, which leads me to Dr. Vanessa's research around just change, like the idea of change. And Dr. Vanessa's research is championing change through collaboration, examining how middle school support team members leverage the MTSS process. And I'm going to let her talk about that, but I'm going to give a story just real quick in there before she does it, because I think it's important to talk about as Black women. One of the things that I experienced in a very significant way, it wasn't real bad, but definitely significant enough for us to talk about, was the spirit of competition between Black women in these spaces, in academic, not academic spaces, but in all many spaces that we're in, right? Around just the collaboration. I remember one time going into a professional development. I knew no one, was a brand new school. And one of the women, I said, oh, I'm going to invite her to come with us. And the other young lady said, no, don't. And I was like, well, why? And she was like, she doesn't really care for you that much. And I was like, why? I do not even know who she is. Like, I just was saying, let's all get to know each other. Because you all know that's me. I bring people together. So it was like, why? Why wouldn't she want to? And it was not until later in my life that I realized that exists between Black women significantly, and we have to deal with that. I can say once again, it was in this cohort where I didn't sense that at all. We were all for each other. And so I want to make sure that we just touch upon your research, Vanessa, because I think that's important. And I don't want us to leave here without people knowing that we study different things, but I want them to know you as an expert in this particular area. So please share with me just how that shows up, Dr. Vanessa, in this conversation, Ain't I a Woman? And your
Thank you so much for that. So the research really centered the collaborative process. Especially, I work with a multidisciplinary team that consists of school counselors, social workers, and then mental health clinicians. And so what we were finding was there was this gap between the resources that were available for students and students that needed the resources receiving that. And we also recognize that the wellness of the practitioner determined how those resources were managed and how they were allocated. And so in that process, I was the youngest person in my group. I had established a relationship over the past 3 years, didn't even know I was going to be engaging in research. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways for me is that relationships matter. If I did not have the relationships that I had, I would not have been able to challenge a system, to invite people to take introspect, and to have a conversation regarding their positionality to racism, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their background, because racism is a system that exists within our world. And no matter who you are, you have a relationship to it. You either are benefiting from it or you are being oppressed by it. So recognizing that and inviting people to take introspective in the process of having these meetings, I would introduce wellness practices that invited each person to examine their well-being through an anti-racist lens. I introduced a anti-racist developmental framework that we found through research, one of our classes, and examining what stage are we in the fight on racism. Are we in denial? Are we in a place of acceptance? Are we actually taking introspect and advocating? And so when we talk about this conversation, I see as a woman, we have a unique gift to collaborate as the Black woman. We have the unique gift to collaborate and advocate in ways that our fellow counterparts cannot, because we've had to be strategic in this fight. We've had to be strategic in positioning ourselves, especially even in the civil rights movement. The Black woman's voice was often not recognized, but they were such a monumental role, and they were an anchor for the movement. You look at Coretta Scott King as just as one of the many examples, and Harriet Tubman, just as one of the many examples. They still stood their ground and they found ways. And I think it just speaks to me as a person. I look at a system and I find the gaps and I find ways to make impact, even if it's that small little dot to push, right? How can we push the marker a little bit further? How can we get this resource to this student? What can I do? What is in my locus of control to be able to do that and make that impact? And I think that's what speaks to being a woman, is we make do with the limited that we have. I think about the old school mother, right? She only had the oil and flour and something, but she gonna make a meal, right? So we had to learn how to survive and to create out of nothing, which is definitely divinely inspired. So we as women have that unique gift. And I think that's the gift that we bring to this fight, is to bring unique resources from our research and from our lived experiences to create something that is powerful, transformative, and sustainable.
Well, that is the key to it all. Like, ain't I a woman? Meaning, ain't I a solution to the problem? Ain't I the one that you're gonna need to come to get some answers? Ain't I the one that you are gonna need to incubate, cultivate, nurture your ideas, your thoughts, your mind?
Oh, you went on mute. Okay.
Okay, hold on, y'all. Here you go. Ain't I multitasking? Ain't I being everything to everybody? Ain't I?
Yes.
To be able to do this and that and more some all at the same time. So yes, ain't I a woman? I just want to say thank you, Dr. Keyana, Dr. Vanessa. Once again, anyone listening to this, we could get going on and on and on, but and just about your research alone individually, But I wanted us to center this idea of being a woman in this space and in this time and in this point in history where we're seeing that we need to rest because we've done a lot of work. To your point, Dr. Vanessa, historically, we have held this down from being unseen, being unrecognized at times, but at the same time, we are in a place where our voice holds what God wants to be said in this season. And so with that, we just come together and speak in that prophetic flow of what we have to become and how we have to belong and how we have to just be who we are, but all for the sake of giving God the glory and being able to be better in humanity than we were before. And so I just want to say again, thank you both for being here. This is not the last time we'll be back, but this is the first time where we're introducing this idea of Ain't I a Woman? Once again, part of our momentum conversations where we give audience and space and freedom and liberty to just radical joy that has come from our journeying together through this program and becoming that community where that is the womb of something that we have yet to see, but we anticipate its greatness. And so I just want to say thank you again, and everyone stay tuned for the next momentum conversation.